Please rewind this cassette.
Why you wearing a mask? Were you going to acid or something like that?
Oh no, it's just they're terribly comfortable. I think everyone will be wearing them in the future.
I've often been really fascinated by the career of Rob Reiner. I really don't understand how he made any of these movies. Some of the early stuff, like The Sure Thing, I'm like, okay, technically I could see how he made this, and with his background in sitcoms and his father being Carl Reiner, that one can make sense to me. And I don't even count Spinal Tap because that's essentially a Christopher Guest film, and then his future films were much closer to Spinal Tap than what Reiner did. But then when we get to like Stand By Me, When Harry Met Sally, Misery, The American President, it's like, where did this come from? Where did this guy become such a good filmmaker and storyteller, and how is he able to get these performances? Perhaps a lot of this just comes down to taste. He had good taste in material, he had good taste in actors, and he just made a bunch of smart decisions. I mean, a lot of his best stuff is because of the writers he had involved with him or the book that he was adapting at the time. However, I really want to focus on one movie today, which I guess over the years in many ways has become his most iconic and famous movie. It's certainly one of the most quoted and ones that people go to, despite it not being a box office success on initial release. The Princess Bride, which was adapted from the William Goldman novel, he also wrote the screenplay, is one of the rare films that somehow combines comedy with an absolute sincerity. In many ways, this film is an homage to the swashbuckling films of an older Hollywood. And even in its presentation, it's something that really wasn't prominent in the 80s and something that we don't even get that much today. I think maybe a comparison would be some of the stuff in Pirates of the Caribbean. And outside of that, just its witty dialogue and sense of tone and characterization is something that a lot of movies have tried to capture since, and I don't think anything's really had that same level of magic. People talk about things like Stardust, but can you really think of another movie that's exactly like Princess Bride? I think a better comparison would be maybe Monty Python. You could look at Holy Grail or something like that and find some similarities, but that goes way more goofy and silly for the most part. The filmmaking craft is there, but it doesn't go for the deep-rooted emotions that happen in this movie. And I've always been amazed by this tone. I've always been confused by it. I always didn't know, is it just complete sincerity or is it a straight up comedy? I mean, this movie is bizarre, man. There's sequences and moments in this movie where it'll be completely involving and feel like a fully like dramatic, important, character-driven film. And then like a second later, it'll seem like a farce, like a straight up like parody or something. And this happens within scenes. It goes from funny to serious, and nobody really plays it up for laughs that much. I mean, you have comedic actors in this movie just playing characters. Christopher Guest is in this movie as a bad guy, and he gives this amazing performance. He doesn't seem like he's really playing it up for laughs. He says funny stuff, but it's not really a comedic performance, it's just a performance. Mandy Patinkin was a famous stage actor, and he's acting his ass off in this movie. Robin Wright, very successful actress, is amazing in this movie. Chris Sarandon's a great actor, and he's being really funny in this, but he's always playing it to the character. I mean, it's high level stuff, and it would have been really hard to pull off with different actors, a different director, and obviously a different screenplay. So, I've been trying to figure this out for a long time. Like, why is Princess Bride so good?
I don't know, and they'd go back and forth like this. I didn't know what they were talking about, so finally I took the script and went home and read it, and I called Rob and I said, please let me play Inigo. I mean, that's just the part I'm dying to play. And he went, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, fine.
That's great. Actually, of all the characters that came out of this film, yours was the character I would like to see more of. I would love to see another film with him alone. Do you feel the same way about this character?
I mean, I love this. I love this movie. I love this character. But what I would want to do, as opposed to doing this character again, which I wouldn't mind doing the character again, but I would want to do it with everybody else too, because one of the reasons this character had such a good time was because this character was with Rob, was with Chris Guest, Cary, Elwes, Andre the Giant, Robin Wright, Chris Reiner. I mean, it was like a family that we were all sitting.
Upon a recent rewatch, and I hadn't seen the movie in a while, and I've seen it at least 50 times in my life. When I was a kid, we used to watch this all the time. And it was weird. I found that the movie at some point does get pretty slow, at least in a modern watch, in the second act. And it takes me a while to kind of get back into it, and some of the comedic beats and things just don't hit me as hard as they did a long time ago. And I'm not sure if that's a product of its age or that's just because I've seen the movie so many times that I'm sort of expecting these things to happen. But typically, I can go in with a movie with a pretty fresh perspective, especially when I take a break from it. What I found was that the movie peaks in that first like 25, 30 minutes, and then it sort of comes around again. And I was trying to figure out why, and I gotta say it. I know everyone's gonna say that Mandy Patinkin is the breakout thing in this movie, and he has the most quoted line in the movie, and he's the character that everyone focuses on. And I get it. It's a great revenge story. It's a brilliant performance, and it really makes the movie. And it's the chemistry between everyone that is a big reason the movie works, especially in the third act when everybody comes back together. That's one reason I think the movie picks up again. But it has to be said, I think if there's one thing from this movie that just blew me away on this recent watch, and it really made me think, why didn't this guy have a better career? It's Cary Elwes as Wesley. I actually think he's the secret weapon to this movie. He's so brilliant in this movie. He has so much charisma. He's so funny. He's so handsome. He's one of the best looking men ever in a movie in this film that you see it and you're like, how wasn't this guy like the biggest actor in the 90s? How didn't he go on to be like the lead of some famous television show? I mean, I know he was in stuff like Saw and Twister, but he never had a role like this again except for like Robin Hood Men in Tights. Cary Elwes is amazing in Princess Bride, and he's the reason, I think, that the movie really gets put over the top. Which I know sounds like I'm discrediting a lot of other people in this, and I'm not trying to do that. I'm just saying I want to break down a little bit why I think Cary Elwes, in particular the Dread Pirate Roberts section of this movie, is the best part about it. And now that I've seen it recently, I'm kind of like, I wish the movie had more of this. I want this character in like a 2-hour movie. I want this character in a bunch of movies. He's just so good. He's iconic in the way that Indiana Jones is iconic, or, Jack Sparrow's iconic, or a James Bond is iconic. I mean, he really does capture that bravura of like an Errol Flynn. It's absolutely stunning. So, let's focus on a couple sequences instead of breaking down everything in this movie, which I could do. I could just go through scene by scene and talk about things that I like thematically, but everyone sort of talked about Princess Bride, and I think everyone generally has their opinions on it. One thing I do want to say, though, before we get into this is that this is some of Rob Reiner's best direction. I've never been a huge fan of the cinematography of this movie. In fact, I'm not a fan of that cinematographer's work in general. I just don't like his lighting. But the actual directing of this movie really stands out from some of the more minor stuff in Reiner's career. I mean, I obviously like Stand By Me a lot and Misery, but this is pretty impressive, like large scale filmmaking, at least when it has those moments. So I want to talk about the sword fight scene, which I think is, objectively speaking, the best sequence in the film. Now, I know you're going to say, how's that objective? I know. I'm going a little Mahler here. Terrible, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, I'm here. I like that my 2 Australian friends are in the chat. That's nice.
Who's the other one?
Cordry.
Oh yeah, Cary, that's right.
Yeah, he's Australian. Man, Cordry, I gotta say, I like your voice, but I think Terrible, you got that kind of like Mahler bravado, man. You need
that dry sort of
you sound
monotone voice.
exactly like him. Holy shit. That impression is perfect. Oh my god. That blew my mind. Holy shit.
The Last Jedi sucks.
That's like
that sort
a
of voice.
Madcap's Adam impression, your movie sucks impression.
I'd like to hear Madcap's impression.
Yeah, wait, yeah,
I've had
do your Adam impression.
Okay.
I know you're on the spot, but
Yeah. I just saw Space Jam 2, and it's fucking awful. Space Jam 2
Oh,
is the
perfect.
worst movie I've ever seen in my life.
It had many logical flaws and inconsistencies.
it's really like they're in the room. But I think it's objectively the best sequence in the movie. So that whole stretch of the movie, when he's trying to get Princess Buttercup from the three guys who've stolen her, just that journey, that section of the film, that section of the story. You know, there's so much here that is so exciting and fun in the pacing of this, that we're on the ship. You know, we get the screaming eels, then we get the climbing up the wall, and then we get the dread pirate Roberts has to go through these three stages to get Buttercup and then reunite with her. It's just great structure. It really, really works, and each part is exciting and gives us a good introduction or fleshes out the relationship with each one of these characters. But at the center of this is Wesley. And man, just the way he uses his intelligence, the way he is just so witty and he emotionally manipulates the situations instead of just like strong manning his way through it. It's something you don't get with a lot of characters in movies. Usually they have like some kind of special power that makes them stand out, or they're just given this ungodly intelligence. But no, this guy is actually just really clever. He has some experience. He's so determined that he's able to, kind of manipulate every situation into what he wants to happen. And it's just something I wish movies did more often. So, about the sword fight, you have the amazing part with the rope and the conversation they have, and then them going up and just that dialogue they have when Wesley's sitting on the rock and, he's being asked about if he has six fingers and he puts the glove up. I mean, you have the great line, "Do you start every conversation this way?" But beyond that, think about many modern movies, and in 5 minutes, just a few minutes here, these two guys talking, we care about both of them deeply. We get a sense of who both of them are. We get their backstories in some sense. We sort of know who Dread Pirate Roberts is if you're paying enough attention, but just getting this backstory and seeing this respect between these two men, as soon as the sequence is over, you're in love with both of these characters, and you want to see more of them. It just doesn't happen in many movies today. They don't like sell a movie. They don't have scenes that are fully realized and have a beginning, middle, and end in the scene. David Mamet has talked about this, that you shouldn't just think about the movie as having a structure, but each scene itself needs to have some sort of structure. We need to start with something and end with something. Well, Princess Bride is a great example of that, especially in these early moments. So, a few details I want to point out that I found really interesting that I noticed on this watch was that, as you know, famously in the sword fight, both guys reveal that they're not left-handed and they switch to their right hand. Now, this is really cleverly written because it's set up beforehand that he's going to fight with his left hand, so the fight doesn't end too quickly. But then when he finds out that the Dread Pirate Roberts is actually a good sword fighter, he reveals that he's not left-handed, only for it to be twisted on us that Roberts isn't as well. But if you notice, and maybe this is something you've picked up on before and I'm just an idiot, Roberts is using his left hand throughout the entire sequence before the sword fight. He reaches for his sword with his left hand. He lifts up his left hand whenever he's doing anything. All of his gestures and behaviors are leaning on his left hand. So not only is he going to do this in the sword fight, he's already playing into it beforehand to psych out his opponent. This is what I'm talking about, of how he uses his cleverness to win fights. Because I'm under the opinion that it's possible that he can fight equally with both hands, that he isn't dominant on either one. He's only giving the illusion that he's dominant on the right hand to overwhelm his opponent in the sword fight. That could be wrong, it could just be me overthinking it, but I think the detail they put into the left hand use before the sword fight actually gives credence to the idea that he was thinking about this. So, I think a big thing about why the sword fight works is that there's story being told not only visually with the sword fight, which is exciting, and it's happening with the music, and every line of dialogue is like laugh out loud hilarious, and these two guys are just playing off each other so well.
You seem a decent fellow. I hate to kill you.
You seem a decent fellow. I hate to die.
Are wonderful.
Thank you. I've worked hard to become so.
I admitted you are better than I am.
Then why are you smiling?
Who are you?
No one of consequence.
I must know.
Get used to disappointment.
But beyond that, it's like it's kind of giving us this beats with the character, and you see how he's winning this fight not just by being technically good. You know, when Montoya throws a sword down and has to like land with the jump, well, Roberts has to show him I can do that better than you. And that's when he's asked, who are you? It's playing with him mentally like, no, you just did that thing. I'm going to do it better than you. And you're not going to be ready for this. And he's not even using the sword at that point. It's just side of a way to psych the guy out and make him think that, oh, I can't stop him. While also being charming and never losing his cool. Which, once again, the respect part is one reason this really works, but it's because he's so unexpected. It's because he's thought of as, well, it's not possible that this guy can beat me in a sword fight. But then he keeps upstaging him in everything. And he does it without giving away too much. Think about it this way. He has told his entire backstory. My father was killed by a six-fingered man. He made this sword, and I'm trying to get revenge, and I'm doing this for money. He doesn't know anything about Roberts, and Roberts won't tell him this. That gives him another advantage. One guy is fighting emotionally. He is driven by this, seeking revenge. He tried to be such a great swordsman just so he could get revenge for his father. Roberts, on the other hand, he's just doing this because his goal is to get Buttercup. He did all this all these years so he could make his fortune, so he could live with her. And I think it's just those kind of little nuances that make this so good, but it all ties into the Roberts character. It also has to be said just how he looks, the Zorro thing. It's just such a great costume. And Elwes looks absolutely amazing in it. And just his physical performance. I love the part where he jumps up on the rocks. And from what I know, the two actors actually did the sword fighting. They actually did the choreography. I mean, how the hell did they do the part where he threw the sword up and catches it? I don't know. I can think of how they did it, but it's really impressive. It's just a wonderfully directed, wonderfully staged, and wonderfully acted sequence. And it has to be said that it really just sets up the momentum of where we're going. We really don't know Wesley as this character yet. We've only seen him at the beginning when he says, as you wish. But in this moment, we're like, who is this guy? We want to know who he is too. Now, we kind of know because we have the backstory, and you can tell it's him with his voice. But it just makes you so compelled to be like, how did this guy become such a badass? This then leads us to the next sequence when he fights Andre the Giant. And once again, it's a funny sequence. He's getting rocks thrown at him. He decides that he's going to have a fist fight. And then the clever writing comes in again. He's been fighting so many groups of people, 6 or 7 guys, that he hasn't had a one-on-one fight in a long time, despite his large size. So Roberts is able to use that against him. He's able to use techniques or do things that he's not used to. He's just swinging and trying to chase him down. It actually sort of reminds me of the fight between the Mountain and the Red Viper on Game of Thrones, where one guy's a lot more lean and fast and keeps making cuts and moving around quickly and doesn't let the size, get to him. One guy can go in close and just choke him out, but one guy's faster, tires him out, and then puts him in a position where he has the advantage. And it seems believable. I don't know if it's believable. I would assume that the bigger guy would kill the other guy in most cases. In real life, if you're going to get in a fight, I would assume that the much, much bigger man is going to win most of the time, but it works cinematically. It makes sense to us. And then, of course, we get the terrific, poison wine sequence with Wallace Shawn just hamming it up, which once again, just Wesley just using his intelligence, knowing this guy's not as smart as he thinks he is, no, he's kind of a clown, and just that he has an immunity to the iocane powder, that he built up an immunity so he can drink both glasses. This is also why I think that he can use either one of his hands in a sword fight, just because of what he does with the powder.
Sire, the finest iocane powder.
Yeah, bitch!
Then, of course, we get the wonderful sequence in the fire swamp, which is when I think the movie slows down a little bit, but I love the backstory on the Dread Pirate Roberts, and how I really like that line where he says, "My name is Ryan." That's really funny, and that gives us just this wonderful thing. That alone seems like a story that could be its own movie about this pirate that just takes on a role and he passes it down to different people throughout the years. I think a lot of people wanted that with James Bond. A lot of people wanted that with Indiana Jones. Hell, you could even do that with Jack Sparrow. It's just a title. It just lives on with different people. But nobody ever really did that in any of these movies. The characters are usually the characters. But in this case, Goldman actually did it. Wesley isn't the Dread Pirate Roberts. It's all in the name, it's all in the presentation. It's how he looks with the mask, it's how he looks with how he stands. It's the whole mythology and everything. In the same way that it is with James Bond when he's drinking the martini and he's wearing a tuxedo, or Indiana Jones has the whip and hat. It's not really the actor, it's the character that we like. It's the idea of the character that we like. And this is deconstructing that and really talking about that who cares who the Dread Pirate Roberts is, as long as he's the Dread Pirate Roberts. He can live on in this. Now, the Mask of Zorro movie played in this a bit too, and I wish that they had done this more with Batman, not just Batman in the films, but Batman in the comic books. At one point, Dick Grayson does become Batman, and then they ended that run and rebooted everything. But I like the idea of Bruce Wayne just passing on Batman to different people and it not always being Bruce Wayne. I think that would have made some of the comic runs a lot better. So that's another thing that I really like about this movie. It's just stories inside of stories, or revealing things that are very interesting. So now we know that, oh, this is how this happened. And they do this in like a 2-minute dialogue scene, and we immediately buy, okay, this is how we learned defense. This is how we learned to fight. This is how he learned to be resourceful. The thing that he always had that made him special was he was intelligent. Even as that farm boy at the beginning, you sang "As You Wish," which means "I love you," he's actually was always super smart. But we don't get that sense from the early part of the movie because all we hear him say is "as you wish," and we think he's kind of a simple dude. But then this is revealing to us that no, 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 he was playing a part then. He was having that secret message then with saying "as you wish." So this is in the head of the character. We're dealing with like a very intelligent guy that's always a few steps ahead of everyone. He's always saying things or presenting things to make somebody think it's going one way, but really he has the long-term plan already figured out. And he's this way in the book too. Buttercup's actually a lot more dumb in the book. And they cut some stuff out that I really like that Wesley says. There's a part where he complains about being tired when he falls down the hill. But with Elwes' performance being so effortless and light on his feet with this whole thing, it just makes you love this character. He's the lead of this movie at this point, and you're so into it that when he gets taken to be tortured, and he's essentially out of the movie for a good chunk of it, and really doesn't get a lot to do even in the third act. I mean, he gets some funny slapstick stuff with his head bobbing around, but we really don't get a big scene with him for a long time. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think the story still works, but rewatching it, I am sort of like, he's almost too good in this role, and this character's almost too good that he elevates all of these sequences that you are just wanting to kind of see a Dread Pirate Roberts movie. I mean, at least that's how I felt. I was like, oh my God, can I just get 2 hours of this? I would watch the shit out of this. I love it. And like I said, the saddest thing about this movie is just that Cary Elwes didn't have a bigger career. He really is a fully realized movie star in this. And his way of going back and forth between that charismatic wit and charm and just drive to being able to play it slapstick and goofy is a really unique talent, especially for a guy who just has those movie star good looks like he does as well. It's pretty impeccable stuff, and I think despite being so praised, I think it's sort of underrated. I think people like overlook it a lot of the time. You could think of modern actors like, hey, Chris Pine could maybe do this, Paul Rudd could maybe do this, but Cary Elwes, man, like Hollywood did not use that guy right. He really, really got screwed. So now I want to talk about what I think is the second best scene in the movie, which is, of course, another Wesley scene, and that is the pain speech that he gives to Humperdinck when he's laying in the bed. Now, we've had this long bit of the movie where, Wesley isn't doing very much, and then here we are again, and we get this incredible monologue that does have funny lines in it. I mean, he's insulting them with these amazing lines like, it's possible, pig, which I try to say as much as I can in my everyday life. But while we're getting all of this, he's really, I mean, he doesn't blink in this scene. He is just like laying it down like he's doing Shakespeare or something. I mean, he is just leaning into this monologue and the music swells up. It's such a powerful moment. It's the thing where half the stuff he's saying is really funny and you laugh at it, but yet it's still a compelling and dramatically moving sequence. It's not just like, haha, that's funny, he's insulting him, and now he's explaining about how he's going to cut off all these things on his face and his feet and leave his ears so somebody could say, "Dear God, what is that thing?" But at the same time, it's pretty hardcore to say that to somebody. Like, it's funny while also saying, "I'm going to do that to you. I'm going to make you live with the pain of everybody knowing that you're a disfigured monster of a being." And it's just that wonderful writing, but the way that Elwes just kills this speech is absolutely stunning. And it's really kind of besides the revenge plot getting solved and the killing of the six-fingered man, it's the moment that really emotionally ties up everything in the movie. It's the moment of, we get early on that this is what this guy does. He is clever and uses his mind to get out of situations. So when this moment comes where he is too weak to actually have a sword fight, any other time he would beat Humperdinck easily, who's only really known for being a great hunter. But here, he can actually get his ass kicked. He could die right now. He doesn't have the strength. So he has to win with his mind. So he has to threaten him in such a way, stall him in such a way, hoping for either backup to show up to save him, or to give himself enough time to where he can kind of just build up just enough strength to stand for a few moments to get himself out of the situation. How many movies in this way? So many films have the character actually like overcome the enemy in a fist fight, or somebody shoots somebody or something like that. He literally wins this situation by punking the guy, by bluffing, by bullshitting. He actually wins by just like keeping a straight face. And you start to wonder, is he saying all that dramatic stuff because he means it? And he actually wants to do this and he's not shutting his eyes? Or is he just putting that all on as a performance to make Humperdinck believe it? Is any of this actually sincere? That's that weird tone thing with this movie. Where does the sincerity come? And then where is it just like, you know, the characters are sort of fun? And that's where some of the whimsy comes from as well. I will say there's one thing that always bothered me about this scene, though. So you have the big dramatic moment where Wesley says, "Perhaps I have the strength after all," and he stands up and he goes to hold up his sword. I don't like that there's a cut in here. So Wesley starts to stand up and raise the sword, and then we cut back to Humperdinck at one point for like a second, and then come back, and the continuity seems slightly off with Wesley raising the sword. Now, I'm assuming that cut was put in there because they mixed two takes together. They had the take of him getting up out of the bed, and then they did a different take of him saying, "Drop your sword," which he says cooler than anyone has ever said in anything ever. But I don't like it. I would much prefer if he got out of the bed and it was just one shot of him raising the sword. Just imagine it without that extra cut. Just imagine it as one sequence with him raising the sword and saying that.
Drop your sword.
I just think the payoff would be there a lot more. I just don't like that kind of quick cut for a second. For a movie that doesn't have a lot of issues in that regard either. I don't really have any problems with editing in this movie or choices that Reiner made. I don't like this choice. I would really like to ask him about this because my only theory is that it's to hide that they were, putting two different takes together with Cary Elwes. I'm assuming that's why he did it. And it was probably what they had to do to make it work, because otherwise I don't know why you wouldn't do that in one shot. Doesn't make sense to me. Just looks better and sounds better. Thing I want to wrap up on is Fred Savage. I'm a huge Fred Savage fan. The Wonder Years is my favorite show of all time. This is the perfect era of Fred Savage. This was when he was still that wonderful child actor. Also check out Vice Versa. I just want to say that the cutting back and forth is just absolutely brilliant. It's always one of the best things about this movie. I wish a Dungeons and Dragons movie would do this, where you're cutting inside of the game and then going back out to them playing it. But um, the moment that I laugh at the most is early on when they're kissing, and then it comes out to him, and he says that part where he's like, "What is this?" The way he says that is just so funny, and I really can't think in the same way that I can't think of anyone else playing Wesley as good as Elwes. I can't think of like who could have done what Fred Savage does in this movie. Now, I know a lot of like wonderful kid actors were around at the time, obviously. I mean, even in Stand By Me, there was these actors, but the particular thing that Fred Savage can do with his face and how he did it in the Wonder Years is just so perfect here that even though he's not in the movie very much, I really think that that's just another special element. I actually wish there was more of that. In the book, there's a lot more of, because Goldman is the one in the book sort of doing an abridged version of this because his father read him the story and he's inserting himself and saying things. I actually wish there was more of that in this. I think if this was a more modern movie, they would probably have more of the cutting back and forth. It just wasn't something that was done too much at the time, but I would have liked a little bit more inserts of the grandfather with the grandson and cutting back or something or changing things around. I think they could have played with that a bit more. That's way more prominent in the book. Like it's pretty much the whole gimmick of the book. Where in the movie we spend a lot of time actually in the story, so the conceit or the gimmick that's being used really doesn't take over the story. Although we do get the emotional payoff with the grandfather saying "as you wish," which means he is saying "I love you." Which, what a perfect way to end, right? So now that the book is a way for them to connect and communicate with each other, and even for him to give his grandson some wisdom, he also is having that double talk with his grandson in the same way that Wesley, at the beginning and throughout the story, is using two ways of speaking to communicate things or presenting himself as one way, but really underneath the surface, there's kind of a mystery there. Like, we know he loves Buttercup, but really, what is this guy thinking? What are his end goals? It feels like on this recent watch, what I got is that he is just so much smarter than everyone in the movie, and he knows it. And it's almost like frustrating for him that he has to deal with all these people that aren't as intelligent as him. And he's almost like angry about it and frustrated about it. And he's like trying to play this tough guy that doesn't care about being tortured or hurt. But I also think at the same time, he's like just very annoyed with this whole thing because I think his like plan could have been perfectly executed early on. Or if she had just waited for him, like he's mad at her, like, why didn't you wait for me? And she's like, I thought you were dead. He's like, if you'd have just waited for me, we could have avoided all of this. And that's such a fun character that I love everything about it. And I'm absolutely addicted to it. And it just blew me away. I always loved it, but I now watching it, I'm like, okay, a lot of scenes in this movie are great. A lot of moments are amazing, totally. But Cary Elwes as this character is the perfect leading man. And I think, personally to me, the thing that makes Princess Bride really, really special, besides everything else being great, the fact that they have one of the most perfect leading men and one of the perfect leading characters in any movie makes this a classic above most classics that have a lot of the good elements about this movie. But there's nothing generic, there is nothing simplistic, there is nothing not interesting and not appealing about this guy. And yeah, it's just great. So, Cary Elwes, I praise you. Reiner for the casting, Goldman for writing the character. And this is a wonderful movie. I do think it's aged a bit slightly in recent years, but the stuff that's good about it, man, it's really good.